I know. All the days start to run together, right?
Days. I know. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. And yourself?
I'm good. I'm good. We were just chatting before joining the studio. I'm so happy to be home. I'm so happy to not be in Europe, even though Europe's wonderful.
Oh, Europe is amazing, especially the food, the fact of, mass transit, so much easier to get
Yeah,
around. But yeah.
it is so much easier to get around. That was one thing I flew into just a different part of town than I normally do, Baltimore, instead
Mhm.
of DC. And I was like, should I take the train and continue with my European lifestyle? But I took an Uber, my hour drive.
I did that. Where'd I do that? I was in LA last week, and it was rent a car, and all I was going was from the hotel to the dealership I was doing training at and back to the hotel. And I was like, why? It's so
Yeah.
much easier to Uber. And of course, they were a dealership. They're like, well, we'll just send a driver to come get you. I'm like, hey, even better.
Yeah. Well, when they send the driver, that's when you know that
Yes.
you're in high-end luxury.
Yeah.
Brian, you are notoriously known for reading faces and being able
Right.
to really strengthen the interpersonal skills, both on the professional and personal side, by way of reading kind of the unspoken language of the body of the face. And so, do
Mhm.
you mind just introducing yourself and what you do?
Sure. So I'm Brian Galke. I live in Dallas, Texas, and I started out life as an introvert. And so, what introverts do, we're always studying other people because we're just trying to figure out like how did they make that work. So,
Mm,
while I always had friends, I always felt like I didn't know how I had friends, and it seemed like it was so easy for other people to kind of get along, and that
mm.
just didn't come naturally for me. Like I love being around people, but I was terrified of being around people at the same time. And so, what introverts do, we pick up books. Like if you could see all the disgusting amount of piles of books I have over here, you would be amazed. And so it was just ways to learn to understand other people. And what started off with is body language was always the first one. Why? Because growing up, there were so many books on body language. And then later on, I was given like how to win friends and influence people. And oddly enough, what really kind of changed my life was I had a roommate who in right after college, he got into pharmaceutical sales. And
Hmm.
I was still an introvert. I was on the help desk, but they kept sending him to classes and he'd give me the books because he wouldn't read them and I loved them. So it was fluke circumstances that kind of changed my life. But then the biggest thing that changed it for me was in 2010, I met a gentleman that I went to go and destroy because the guy ruined my night. And instead, he ended up changing my life. So we'll leave it with an ominous kind of term like that.
Well, are you allowed to share the story, or will
Oh,
they
absolutely.
sometimes
Oh, yeah. No, we
That's
just had to
very
leave a cliffhanger for a minute, right?
yeah.
No, it was a friend of mine came in from out of town. She said, let's go to dinner. I showed up at the restaurant. She calls, says she's not going to make it. And I'm like, why? And she said, well, you got to come meet this guy. I'm like, why should I come meet this guy? She goes, because he can read faces. And I go, yeah, I'm not coming for that crap. I'm like, I've got all these books. I've never heard of this. I go to the library. It doesn't exist. This guy's full of it. And she finally convinced me to go because she was from out of town, actually in your neck of the woods. She used to live in Virginia. And
Okay.
so she was here and she's like, come on. But I went with a plan. And my plan was to prove that this guy was a fraud. So I
I
went,
love that that was your intention. You're like, I'm
yeah,
gonna
well, this
rip
guy
him
ruined my
apart.
night. I was supposed to have a dinner plan with my out of town friend. And this was
Yeah,
pre Uber. And I don't drink and drive. So like I'd already had a glass of wine. I'm like, no, I'm not going to drive.
yeah.
And but she finally convinced me to go. But I was going to prove like, will you, and I may have a stubbornness on this part. We'll go back to like abandonment, rejection issues, whatever. And I'm like,
Mhm.
you chose this dude over me. So I'm going to prove that this guy's a fraud. And I couldn't do
Mhm.
it. And I went in, he was so disarming when you first met him. So for being an attorney, he just had this really human appeal about him.
Mm.
And what ended up happening is he was an attorney who learned it for jury consulting, and he ended up realizing that it had practical terms outside of the courtroom. And he
Yeah.
left it and he taught this all over the world. But I was still skeptical. I thought, okay, I've read books on, well, if anybody's in sales or has to do presentations, read books on mentalism, magicians, you name it, because you learn stagecraft. And so what I was waiting for this guy to do was use what they call Barnum statements, which is generic enough statements that apply to everyone. Like, oh, you've had
Yeah.
a hard time in life. Oh, you know somebody's name who starts with pick any letter you want.
Yeah.
And so I was waiting. I was going to bust this guy when he did it. And he wasn't doing it. And he sat us all down at dinner. There were like 6 of us. He went person by person, feature by feature. And when he
Wow.
was doing that, I thought, okay, I'm going to see if he says the same thing but with different features or vice versa. And I was waiting and I was watching and I couldn't catch the guy. And then when
Wow.
he finally got to me, he did the same. Like he told me what my face said. And I was like, there's something to this. Like the guy's been digging through my trash. It was kind of unnerving to a degree.
Yes.
And, but I'm a skeptic by nature, you know. So what I did is I thought, okay, I'll buy the book. And I
Hmm.
bought the book and I would take it with me when I was going. And I used to install things in all places, jails and prisons. So I was on
Hmm.
the road. And so I'd leave the book out and human nature would say like, hey, what's that book about? Because it was called Amazing Face Reading. I'd say, well, I took this class. I kind of think this guy's full of crap. Can I ask you questions? And they'd say, yeah, go for it. And so when we did that, basically I would show them what the feature is and I'd open up the book and I'd show it to them. I would say, hey, is this accurate? And while it wasn't 100%, it was highly accurate.
Wow.
And
So
I
you were
thought,
doing real live testing against what you were reading.
yes, because I just don't
Wow.
trust something I've never heard of. Like you say body
Right.
language, there's dozens of books on the shelves, but I'd
Yes.
never heard of this. So I thought, I don't know. This could just be some
Right.
guy's ploy to make money.
Yeah. And it's called, what is it officially called? Facial.
Physiognomy. If you go back to the very first book, it's been around since the Greeks.
Okay.
Aristotle wrote the first book on it, and it's called Physiognomy. Now, I can tell you that when you Google that, the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to come up and say it's a pseudoscience, and it is. If anybody doesn't know what a pseudoscience is, it's something that somebody claimed was a science, but it can't pass all 5 metrics of the scientific method with 100% accuracy. What's
Hmm.
really funny is, you want to know what else a pseudoscience is? Statement analysis, body language, all these things, because they're not 100% repeatable. But
Right.
people see that first word and they're like, okay, thanks.
Yes. Yeah. They're gone.
Yeah. And it's because we're so used to snake oil salesmen, you know, all these things of people are saying things just to sell a product. But
Yeah.
that's the funny thing is when people dive into it, like it's highly valuable. So using last week, I was in California, and a company normally brings in just their sales team because
Mhm.
everybody wants to create sales. But this group was a dealership and they brought in their service people and their customer service people because what they realized in a day and age of AI and automation, people
Yes.
skills are going to be the only thing that keep us around.
I
And it's
love
getting
that you
scary.
just said that. Absolutely. Yes, it really is the person to person human connection that's going to
Right.
solidify and differentiate us. Because the human skills are already being, in terms of the digital side of things, you know, the hard skills are being so taken away from. Well, I guess it's the soft skills, like
Right.
the right. That's the right term.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's knowledge is no longer power. Like when I
Yes.
was growing up, it's whoever had the highest academic access to knowledge, right? That they paid for. So they
Mhm.
got their masters, they got these special certifications. But really, with AI coming in, Chat GPT, Claude, you name it, Grok, you have access to information. Now you don't know is it 100%, but there's literally nothing from stopping people from learning anymore. There's no
Mm,
access to, you know, the barrier to access for information.
right.
And so what that means is I'm 50. And when I was growing up, it's knowledge is power and you hoard information and that's how you get ahead in life. That's
Mm,
not how it works anymore.
yes.
Now everybody has access to almost anything that you need. So like I have an 8-year-old. I don't believe by the time she's 18 that there will be colleges
Mm,
for her, with the exception of if you want to be a doctor, you know, if you want to be an engineer,
yeah,
an architect, things of
yeah,
that nature, yes. But for 90% of jobs, it's not going to
yeah.
be there.
Well, and we
And
see it with trades. You know, we see
yeah,
it with trades that you don't need to go to school. You go to a trade school for what, 9 months or 18 months or so, and
yeah,
then you're good. You know how to do this. And AI is not replacing those jobs.
it's not. Well, you say that. I don't know if you saw this past weekend. It was like putting out concrete into somebody's house, and it was
With
based,
a robot.
yes, with a robot. So what'll
Yeah.
happen is with a lot of trade things, we'll see more of a supervisor role for if
Mhm.
it's something that a robot can do.
I
But
and
somebody,
I think that's further away from us. I think you're right, because I saw another story about how it was laying bricks. Like, it was literally
Yes.
building a house. I think we're further from that, but maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong that it'll come back sooner.
Well, it all depends, right? Like, how many robots is Elon supposed to release in the next 2 years? The question is, what will they be able to do and not do? Now, with
Right.
that being said, it'll be a question of, can they do it, or will we let them do it? So that's two
Yes.
diametrically different questions. And what I say by that is, like, right now, if you want to have surgery done, you don't have to have a doctor. You can go have it done by the Da Vinci robot. But we
Yes.
like meeting with our doctor and talking through the surgery, and you can't do
Right.
that with a robot. So
Well, I
what's
almost
really,
wonder.
yeah,
Go ahead.
no, go, ladies first.
I wonder if there is still going to be that supervisor element to
Mhm.
even surgery, where I actually think I might want the robot to do it, but I want to talk to my doctor.
Yes.
We're
It,
both going to
it's one of those things that we are so used to automation in some areas and we hate it in others, right? Like, I had to change a flight on American Airlines the other day. And as soon as the automated operator picks up, I'm like, oh God, here we go. And I'm like, agent, right? We hate it. But I know people who right now, if you're in a city that has Waymo, they want
Mm,
Waymo to pick it up because they don't want to have to talk to the driver.
yes.
And I have not been in an autonomous car yet. Like, there's that
Yeah.
little part of me that thinks, we don't know, is it going to go haywire? And there's other people who are like, I don't have to talk to someone, even better.
Yes. Well, and to your point of being able to use the facial reading aspect of things, if Uber drivers were able to read faces and know, okay, this person does or does not want to engage, because there are people who will intentionally ride in an Uber for the
Hmm.
conversation, and now, we're seeing others intentionally not for that very reason. And so
Yes.
I just wonder, to your point of the human being is now the greatest differentiator, and we don't know who we are. We also
Right.
don't know how to connect with others at that level that's going to drive the type of connection that breeds to sales and even beyond sales, just a healthy relationship.
Right.
So this environment the other day, where it was the salesman, the serviceman, what
Mhm.
were there different questions posed by different people, or
Oh,
was everybody kind of equally interested?
it was, they want to know how to use it for their own departments. So let's go over some just high level facts.
Yeah.
It's estimated that by 2030, between 300 million and 800 million jobs will be replaced by AI and automation. That's
Mm,
30% of the workforce around the world.
mm,
And when people see that statistic, they start going, oh crap, I need a job, I need money. So that's what
yeah.
gets people interested. Is some people are away from fear and some people are towards pleasure, right? So you have to figure out, how are people wired and how do they want to learn? Well, salespeople are, you eat what you kill. And that is, if you don't sell a car, you get fired or you don't make any money that month, right? And so they have different questions like, okay, how can I move closer to the buy? But then you have the service department, which is it ever fun to take your car in for service? It's not, right? Like, it
Mm,
doesn't matter if it's an oil change, but especially if it's a warranty issue. Now you have to have a rental car and I got to move all this stuff from my car to that car. So theirs were more of, how do they make people feel comfortable with a bad experience, versus
yes.
salespeople, it's how do I get someone to purchase the vehicle? But they have to work in unison in that a salesperson has to hand it off to the service person. And if the service person does a poor job, guess what? They're never going to come back to the salesperson. So it's a very
Right.
symbiotic world. That's why it was
Yes.
smart. And I come from a company that when I worked for a smaller company at a Christmas party, the owner would get up and he'd go, and I wasn't in sales at the time, but he'd go, see those salespeople right there? They're the reason you all have jobs. Well, what did that do to everybody else? It alienated the salespeople from the rest of the company,
Yeah.
because it's true. Salespeople get you in the door and get your product in the customer's hands.
Right.
But if you have a bad product or you don't know how to service it, it doesn't matter. And that's
Mm,
what more companies need to move towards is, yes, there's always a budget for sales teams. And that's where I end up getting brought in, because everybody needs a competitive advantage against their competition. But
right.
it's truly, everybody needs these skills, right? And it takes an entire team to make anything work. It doesn't matter what you're selling or doing. But that was what
Right.
was unique, is it was a sales manager who brought me in. It was his budget, but he said, I want back office people. I want finance people, because you know what else we need? We need things from our coworkers. And so it was
Mm.
all about how to even understand each other. So he took his budget, which could have been all about how to sell more, but he made it about how do we become a better organization.
I love that. Brian, that's so important. You said it's a symbiotic relationship. And so
Mhm.
often we're only looking at the top of the funnel, which is sales and marketing, bringing the customer
Right.
in. And we never follow the yellow brick road until the completion of the sale. We've got money in our hand. And then even beyond that, is that customer coming back? Are they referring people?
Right.
What is the state of the customer on the other side of the purchase? I
Right.
was doing some data analysis on a particular client and found that in tracing and following the yellow brick road, 11% of their sold jobs ended up being canceled. And
Mhm.
for the majority of the time, it was because lack of communication. They had no idea what the status was of their job. And this was a home service company, right? So they
Mhm.
had weeks on end where they were building the design and then running through with insurance. And there was a lot happening on the back side of things that the customer doesn't see, but the lack of
Mhm.
communication and the lack of ability to form connection. And I mean, it was wild, like 11%. So that means more than, let's say that they've got $100,000 in this one particular service vein in that 1 year. I mean, they're
Mhm.
losing a good chunk of that just by way of not catching up with the customer and keeping them informed. That is so easy to fix. That is so easy to fix. And we need to be looking at the end of the customer life cycle and what happens at every part in between.
83% of customers leave their current provider because of miscommunication.
Mm,
83%. And we all know if anybody's in business, it's easier to keep a client than it is to chase a new client.
yes.
But most companies don't invest on what do they need to do to keep the existing client.
Retention.
Yes.
We need to have a budget for retention.
Yes.
We need to have a
By the way,
budget for the
Costin says
bottom.
hi in the chat or on Facebook.
Say that again. Who does?
Costin said two of my favorite
Oh,
people. Yes.
Gossam, yay. I really, really find that paying attention to the bottom of the funnel and to what happens, it's kind of like, look at it as like the split in the road. So after the purchase takes place, there's multiple different manners in which they can make decisions. And
Right.
then what path are they choosing? And do we even have our data set up to be able to know? Because data, knowledge is power, to your point,
Mhm.
but it's slowly dwindling away for so long as we don't have access to the data itself, and then obviously being able to read it intelligently. But yeah, I just think what you're saying about having a budget for retention, that is going to change businesses if they listen to that advice.
100%. The challenge that we're up against is this day and age is it's hard enough to get new clients because it's who's the better marketer. But
Mm,
the problem is once you get your product in there, it's referrals. I mean, you go on, what's the
yes,
first thing at least I do when I go on Amazon? I look at what do they recommend? How many reviews do they have? So
yes.
testimonials are going to become more important than ever because with AI and deep fake and everything else that's coming, third party is what we're going to trust versus who's better at building a website.
Yeah. Isn't
Yeah.
that the truth? Have you been seeing much about people using AI bots to form the initial genesis of the community, to form the initial reviews? Like there's a lot more of that happening as well.
Agreed. I think we're going to see, well, you're probably aware of this. The last year, the FTC has been cracking down on influencers and everything else. There's a few accounts. If you don't follow them, we'll talk about them offline. But that's the thing that they're looking at now. So now there's even talk on if you use social media and you buy followers or engagement, that you're going to have like a little asterisk that says "I bought followers." So I think we're
Oh
going to
my
see.
gosh, are you
Oh yeah,
serious? I
study
did
the
not know
FTC.
that.
Yeah, FTC is really looking into it because what's happening is what are
Wow.
influencers being done is they're being paid to recommend a product or service. And when I got started, like my first coach was like, "Hey, buy followers," because back then followers meant you were somebody.
Yeah.
And I almost did it. And I'm not hating on anybody who did, but if the FTC comes out and says you have to say I bought followers, what's that going to do to the people who trusted you because of your following? And there's a lot of big name
Yeah.
people who that's how they first got started because that was a way to stand out. It's always about marketing, right? So we see
Mm,
people who go to Times Square and they've got their picture up on a billboard, right? That's a form of marketing. We see, all these different things, but I think you're really going to see over the next 2 to 3 years, if the FTC continues like they're doing right now, you're going to have all these disclaimers everywhere, kind of like if you are representing something and you're an Amazon affiliate, you have to say, by the way, I'm an Amazon affiliate. No harm, no foul. It's just, it has to be noted somewhere on your website.
Right.
So I do think we're going to see those changes with all these people coming out and people using AI bots for so many different things. I think you're going to have an asterisk to let people know that.
And what a blessing that is, right? I mean, we're starting to see that a lot more on Facebook itself. You have to, it has to say this is AI generated. I think that it's the authenticity now is becoming more invaluable than ever before. And so it's so paramount that we start now cultivating honestly, our own selves at an internal level so that we can come forward from a place of authenticity. I had this, so I was at the tail end of writing my book a couple weeks ago, and I was just sitting and like, why do we know? And I was really tracing that, like going deeper and deeper. Why does knowing matter? Because at the end of the day, it's like, okay, well, I want to know myself. Okay, but why? Like, what is the intent? And I ended up coming to this place of realization of, to know self, it like brings us so at our core center so that we're so connected that thus we create. Creation is the hallmark of knowing. And that is why we come to know, is so that our creation is truly authentic. It's truly original. It's truly unique to you and me. And the more we see authentic driven creation, the more we're going to see people really stand out, and then thus breed trust and real connection with the audience. And it's just, it's such a beautiful concept that we get to create something brand new of our own volition, but we have to know who we are in order to do so.
100%. Couldn't agree more. That's what drives me nuts, is when I see all these ads for, I'm making $15,000 a month on faceless videos. Yes, you can. But if you're using AI and something to create something that you're not a part of, that you're not adding a little bit of your soul in there, how are you any different from anybody else? I mean, we all still want the human aspect for pretty much everything. I mean, so we talked about earlier, when I call American Airlines, I want to talk to an agent, not AI. Why? Because I want to feel seen. I want to feel heard. I want them to understand what I'm going through. Could I eventually do it through the robot? Possibly, yes. Yeah. But I think we're going to see, what we're seeing right now is people are so excited. We're going to AI this, AI that. But I think we're going to get back to what's really going to emerge is people dealing with people again. Because just like when we do a call center now and we hate that a person doesn't pick up, we can tell to a degree what's AI generated, hey Jen, versus is it really Brian? It's inauthentic in that how your message is crafted. So for example, when I take up a video of an event I spoke at, I use AI, so I throw it into Opus Clips. And then I take that transcription, I put it into ChatGPT, and I say, okay, make it, add emojis, don't use M dashes, whatever. But it's still my content that's being out there. Versus if I said, go study my website and create a post for me, it's not written in my voice. Right. And the reason that this day and age we're following people on social media or in person is for their voice. And you can tell when it's written by them or when it's not. Hey, Michelle.
I completely agree. And actually, to that point, this is something I wanted to ask you about, because, people know you, you got your website there, Subtle Skills, as the ability to kind of read and understand those subtle nuances of the human person that you're encountering. And so what I wanted to ask you, because this is not something that you're notoriously known for, however, you've done such an incredible job building a following. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because it dovetails so nicely into, okay, authentic content, not buying followers, but then how do you grow? Let's say you really actually do want to invest. How do you do that?
Sure. Well, the first part, it's a 4-letter word, but luck. And, and what I mean by that is, look, I've posted videos that I thought this one's going to kill, and you get nothing. And then I had one, I was talking about eyebrow height, but I said height with a TH. That one's at 3 million views because half the people hated it. I said height with a TH, and they're like, that's not a word. And I went to dictionary.com. I'm like, actually it is. It's just not used anymore. Here you go. And I'm telling you, it's the dumbest. Let me see what it's at right now. It's the,
that is so funny.
And it was a podcast. It wasn't even mine. I didn't post it, but I was tagged in it. And literally people lost their mind because I said height with a TH.
So I'm going to find, I love that.
Yeah. I mean, you just never have any idea, but it does take consistency of posting. And I'll tell you on
Yeah.
that one, that was a podcast that was in Vegas. They didn't pay for me to fly out there. I actually did it on the way to Greg Reed's Secret Knock. I already had a ticket to Secret Knock. And Sean and Lacey reached out and said, "Hey, do you want to come be on the podcast in Vegas?" And it was the day before. And I thought,
Nice.
let me look. And I changed my airfare to add in Vegas. I flew in that night, got in at like 10 o'clock at night, did the podcast, got done, went straight to the airport and flew to San Diego. So you never know what's going to hit and what's not. But okay, so here we are. I'll see if it.
How much time somebody needs to make a
So
decision.
I'll do it.
Eyebrow height tells you how much time somebody needs to make a decision.
Okay, so because I said that
I
one's at
love that you
2.8.
found it. This is great.
Yeah, 2.8 million views on that one.
Wow.
30-second podcast clip, and people lost their mind because I said height.
So
You just.
this is so good.
Yeah,
Oh my
you
God.
never know what it's going to be. And that's why. So the answer back to your question is it's about consistency and presence. And, people don't want to get on podcasts. Get on podcasts. Podcasts help me perfect my message. I met Steve Sims through a podcast. I wouldn't be sitting here. Let's go full circle. Joe Ingram. He's like, "Hey, I got a podcast. You want to be a guest co-host?" I'm like, "Sure." That's somebody inviting me to come along. And I'm like, "Okay." Steve was a guest. I told Steve he needed to trim his mustache and why. And Steve goes, "Oh, you think I care?" But he used a few extra words there. But I followed up with Steve afterwards. And I said, "Hey, Steve, this is the reason why I told you on the show that you need to trim this." And he's like, "You want to be on my podcast?" I'm like, "Yeah." And after the podcast, he goes, "You want to come speak at my event?" I'm like, "Yeah." And we wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for that podcast.
Yeah, we met because of that. Wow.
Yeah. And
wow.
Yeah. And so you've gotten, let's kind of go back to what we were talking about before. People want to be around people. The reason that you and I are talking is we met at a small in-person 40-person event, right?
Yeah.
Actually, technically the first time I met you was at TNC, but Steve took me as his guest.
Yes. Oh, and that was so brief. It was so fast.
Right. But then you ended up at a speakeasy. Right? And then what happens is when you get in these small groups and where you can actually interact with people, that's where you can form friendships, relationships, business partnerships, you name it. So there's still that human need. And we saw that back in 2020 when people were locked in their houses and couldn't see people. We saw as a society, it goes down.
Yes.
And what do you do? What do we do with the worst of the worst criminals? We put them in solitary confinement. Keep them away from other people. So that's what a punishment is to take people out of your life. So I do think, if you want to go just, what was it? The movie WALL-E. We don't want to end up only staring at screens and never talking to each other.
Yes.
And that's why really, truly right now, because of technology, automation, AI, you name it, people skills will be the new currency in the future. Hands down, there's no doubt in my mind, because a machine can do everything faster and better, but it can't make you feel better as a person.
You mentioned abandonment at the very beginning of this, and how, you actually got into this because it almost triggered this core wound in you. And you were like, what the heck? I'm going to go to join this dinner because this woman chose somebody else over me. That is probably one of the best examples of alchemy that I've heard. I love that taking action based on, that this is triggering a wound, but instead of rejecting everything that caused the pain, you actually leaned into it and pursued it. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because what you just said was so incredibly brilliant. And I want us, so human connection, human relationship, the ability to interact with others, predicated from a known self, because that's the other thing, it can so easily become manipulation if we're not leading with authenticity.
Correct.
So how did you come to even realize that was a wound that you had?
So honestly, I didn't at the time. It's in retrospect. Here's the funny thing about being older, right? I'm 50. I just turned 50 in December.
Yay, happy birthday.
Thank you. You reach a point that you stop caring as much. And what I mean by that is by the time you reach 50, you've been poked at, prodded, done so many things in front of doctors and everything, but you also went through challenges. And if people are willing to go through challenges and then seek help for that, like here's the crazy thing about society. let's say you're overweight and you're like, I hired a trainer. People are like, yes, good for you. If you said, hey, I'm overweight, I hired a nutritionist. Awesome, good for you. You know what? I'm just not feeling 100%. I went to a therapist. Whoa,
Yes.
what's wrong with you? Right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I was of that mindset. Here's the craziest thing. I probably wouldn't be the person I was if I hadn't gotten divorced. And the reason I say that is we separated and we thought, okay, let's see if we can make this work or not. And we went through different therapies. And I went in with this narcissistic, egotistical, wait till she finds out how screwed up she is and why it's all her fault. And then you get in there and you're like, oh, I have some things too. Because like everything else, let's start off when you're first dating somebody, you ignore the red flags, right? But the whole thing is you can never see your own red flags. And when you go through therapy,
Brian, that's a mic drop right there.
It's true, right? Like I can tell you every single thing you do wrong on a regular basis. I can't see what I do that's wrong.
Wow.
And it's because we live in the observer world where we can't see all of our own actions. It's kind of like, if you add weight or lose weight, you see yourself in the mirror every day, so you can't see the difference. And then you see somebody and they're like, hey, are you okay? Or, hey, you look amazing. And we're like, with what?
Yeah.
And, we just don't know. So I am a huge fan. Post all that. Like, give me anything woo-woo. Give me any class I can go to. I went through like some personal challenges 3 weeks ago. And somebody said, hey, come out to Arizona and let's do a nervous system reset. We're going to take you through breath work and some other stuff. I walked in feeling like I weighed 500 pounds and I walked out like feeling light as air. And it was 3 days there wasn't really therapy. It was just learning a new tool to work through things that were weighing you down at the time. And again, why was it important? I could have gone on and asked ChatGPT to help me, but it took a person helping me. And we need others more than we think we do. And that's why it's so vitally important that we figure out how to interact with people. And I'm going to show you my whole nerd moment. Give me 1 second.
Yay.
This is how I spent this past weekend. Well, it helps if I put it the right way up. So I'm reading The 6-Minute X-Ray by Chase Hughes. And this is a great one. He worked for a lot of different government agencies. They gave him over $1 million worth of training and how to understand people. It's a good book. So what did I do this weekend? It was a little bit warm. I sat inside and, read this and played with my daughter and did other things. But you should constantly, now it used to be, take this class because you might get this % raise. Yes. People need to start investing in emotionally intelligent training because it's what's going to keep them employed. Or if not, it's what's going to help them get their next job.
Ryan, this has been so good. I love this conversation. I was thinking while you were talking, I was like, I should have been sitting across from you for the Knowing podcast, but this is why I started the Knowing podcast.
That one happen. There'll be a part 2.
There will be. I know. Maybe even a part 3 because I'm like, feel like we're just getting started. Yeah. But I'm just so grateful because everything that you're saying, emotional intelligence is currency. These tools that you're learning and the tools that frankly I've been learning as well, but they're tools that we should have learned when we were 5, 6, 7. Like deep breathing,
100%.
how to control those big emotions that we experience as kids. We still feel those today. I was reading a book by Peter Levine, and he was talking about scientists were capturing a polar bear. So that polar bear was running away. They shot him with a dart, and then he, collapsed because he was tranquilized. And then they put him in a cage and captured him. And then when he woke up, he started slowly like shaking, and then like violently so. And his legs were moving, his arms were moving. And then when he slowed down the clip, he saw that the polar bear was actually completing the running motions. It was like he was reenacting the trauma. And then all of a sudden he calmed down and his breathing returned to stasis and he was totally fine because Peter Levine was looking at it and he was like, why is it that humans are like immobilized? Looking at war veterans, this book, Body Keeps a Score, they impact us to such an extreme. But then you look at wild animals and they, like literally you'll see a lion with, let's say an antelope in its mouth. He thinks it's dead. Then he runs to go get his kids. The antelope's lying there. And then he gets up and prances away. And it's just like, how are these animals so okay after such a traumatic moment? And it's because they complete the trauma cycle. They do the deep breathing, they do the shaking, and then they're fine. And so that has completely changed the manner in which I view emotions. It's like heightened it to a degree of like, I actually have to just cry or whatever it is, whatever that big emotion is that feels perhaps way too elevated for what the circumstance entails, because it's so deeply rooted in the past. So I was so intrigued when you said that your friend made that decision to go to this reading, the face reading, and you felt that abandonment wound. Probably your feelings towards her were heightened because of that previous wound. Same for me, and same for all of us. Our emotions today are so predicated in the past. So the learning and cultivation of these tools, they bring us freedom, and they bring us in the ability to engage with community in a way that we so desperately need.
100%. And going back to your study, the reason animals can shake it off is they're part of a pact, but they don't have that DNA wired of, oh no, I'm going to be judged by the other people. So they've done all these studies. Yeah.
Wow.
So animals, you're 100%. I knew where you were going with it, because animals, anything that happens, they literally shake it off and they're like, okay, and they move on. They don't hold on to resentment.
It off.
Yes. We hold on. We put it as this backpack of baggage that we have. That's, all these things. And that's because we were wired that if we weren't accepted and we were ostracized by the tribe, they kicked us out and we died. So it's built into our DNA to worry about what other people think, for fear of being rejected and removed from what kept us alive. And that's when you really look at that. Back to your point about education, the modern education system was designed to create factory workers, not to create better people. That's what the parent's job is. And I say that we ship our kids off for 8 hours a day. I have an 8-year-old, but when you get them back is when you have to really focus on things. So one of the slides in my PowerPoint is, why am I so passionate about this every day? And it shows a picture of a kid holding up a sign that says help, because both the parents are on their cell phones. And then it shows all these kids at dinner where they're at the restaurant with each other, but they're on their phones and they're not even talking. That is the new society.
And the parents are leading the way.
100%. Look, I'm guilty of it. That was actually one of the things that popped in my head the other day, is I didn't realize how often, when it's time I could spend with my kid, am I spending time with this, and I was like, ooh, okay, we need to add in times to put it down. Just like if she's on her tablet for longer than an hour, I'm like, all right, you've been on your tablet for an hour, step away. Let's work on sand or whatever else it is. Are we doing that for us? We tend not to.
Yes. Wow. That's radical responsibility too, because it is so much easier to get sucked into living someone else's life, rather
100%.
than confronting our own. And when we confront our own, so often we're forced to reckon with the person in the mirror, and there's uncomfortable truth there.
Oh yes. Very, very much so.
Brian, thank you. I so loved our time together.
Absolutely.
This conversation was wonderful. So I'm grateful for you, my friend, and I'm excited for when I get to see you in person. Give you a big hug.
I was going to say, I hope to see you again in person soon.
I hope so. Here we go. I just found how to end the stream. All right, so I'll go ahead and end this.